But again, welcome. And, John, as I thought about this topic, I was really reflecting this leadership journey, leadership path to excellence in leadership. I was really reflecting on some conversations I've recently had with some individuals who I certainly see a future leadership position in their path. But as I was chatting with them, they didn't. And that really gave me pause. So as I was talking with them to try to understand that, what they shared was that they felt that something special, something different, something unique had to happen for them to become a leader. Maybe they had to be asked to join a leadership position. Maybe they had to be at the right place at the right time. Maybe there was some special initiation or list of steps, checks that they had to have to become a leader. So that really gave me pause and made me ask myself, how did I become a leader? What path did I take? So I was curious. How did you become a leader? You hold a PhD. You've led probably every single position that EMS organizations have. You helped create EMS in a foreign country. You've been a consultant for 40 plus years, been part of the Journal of Emergency Medical Services, had your own publication. How did your path begin in leadership? And what were those steps along the way?
So I love that question, and I like that you're using this word path, because a path, is starts from someplace and it goes somewhere. So if I'm going to get on the Superior National Hiking Trail, and I'm going to do that, or I'm going to hike the Appalachian Trail, I am starting somewhere and I'm ending up somewhere. In between there's lots of stuff going on. And one of the reasons I'm so excited about this topic is I'm excited about the fact that one of the things that you and I keep learning, and really at the core of this Leadership Alive broadcast, is this whole idea that we never arrive. And that leadership is an ongoing process, and we like to think of it as a journey because you encounter various things along that path, various monsters, various beautiful scenes, various resources, all encountered on that path. And all of those things have an impact on you. And so this question you ask, how did I become a leader, gets to why I think, and I hope that if you're tuning in, you'll listen to this. Because here's the deal. Very few of us become leaders for our own ego gratification. The vast majority of leaders that we encounter, and especially true leaders, those who are influential with people, have become leaders because they actually see somewhere that they want to go. And so this was my own journey. My own journey was, those of you that have known me for a few years know that historically, I, as a very young person, became an EMT and then a paramedic, and worked in the early days of EMS development in the United States in the 1970s. And one of the things that hit me right away was I wanted to make the most out of the EMS experience. I thought that if you were going to put yourself in harm's way to go out and take care of other people and help other people in crisis, that the payoff should be there, that the experience should bless my life and bless all of the other workers. And what I saw early on in EMS, because we never figured out the funding mechanism and we didn't figure out things well, that often EMS got delivered on the backs of the employees. that they were the ones who, because they had a curiosity to have an adventure and to make a difference and help people in difficult situations, so often what happened to them was they were taken advantage of. And at first, when I was a young man, I didn't bother me. Pick up extra shifts, work long hours, work for no overtime, teach CPR in between times, all of the other things that we've all done along the way. But one of the things that really hit me was I said, the people who sacrifice to do this work should be respected and cared for. That's what pulled me into leadership. It pulled me in. And so if you trace my history back and you go back and look at some of the earliest articles I published and some of the books that I wrote back then and things that I was interested in influencing this industry to pay attention to workers. Because I believed, and most of my colleagues believed, that if we were happy, if we felt good about ourselves and the organizations we worked for, that we would deliver the best possible patient care. And so that's what pulled me in, and it was actually a calling, and it hasn't stopped even to this day in my work with employee well-being. What pulled me was a desire to change something, stop some stuff, make some things different, make an improvement. And that was the calling to leadership. And what was really different about that, Aaron, was that at the time, only thing that was being talked about was management.
Mm-hmm.
People were saying, well, do you want the supervisor job? Do you want the director of operations job? Do you want the manager of clinical services job? There was those jobs that were mostly management, but the genuine call to leadership came because I said, you know what? The experience of working in EMS should be a good experience. And that's what pulled me in. And so it took lots of stumbling, toe stubbing, falling, some successes, and some boxing around the ears for me to even begin to be a leader. And here at my age, I still think that there's so much I have to learn. I'm my Amazon bill is way too much because I keep buying books and I keep doing stuff because this idea of being a leader and being able to influence this industry and influence others, it just won't let go.
Wow.
And
Thanks.
how about you? So your path was different. How did you get into this?
Yeah, it's interesting. Such a starkly different path. I needed a part-time job. I was starting college, fresh out of high school. Uh, McDonald's was 4.25 and didn't want to do that stuff. Looked in the paper and here I saw an ad for this ambulance service. Come to find out later, it was a volunteer ambulance service. You got paid when you went on runs and they paid $10.50 an hour. I was like, wow, I'm not the smartest guy, but it's like that 425, 1050, that seems like a good deal. I don't know what an EMT is, but I was a Boy Scout, first aid, CPR. I can figure that out. And as I started on this volunteer ambulance service, I just noticed some things that I thought could be better.
Mm,
I thought maybe I could help with. Uh, this was 1990, so computers weren't all of that common. And I had grown up with a fascination with computers. I actually had my own computer business at the age of 16. I did mailing labels for companies. And so I had a database I designed and I printed mailing labels. Remember on the sheet of paper with the dot matrix printer with the little holes in the side to buy beer money. I'm sorry, to put gas in the car, not beer money, gas in the car money. And so I thought, gosh, I could make like a form that we'd use when we check the truck, and I could make a supply order form on the computer. And I just thought there were some things I could do to help. And that caught the attention of the individual who was running the ambulance service. And he thought, huh, Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Because I would make the thing and I just brought it to him and said, "Do you think this would be helpful? If not, that's okay. I just had this idea and I thought I would do it and just get your thoughts and ideas and feedback." And then the ambulance service got transitioned from, it was owned and operated by the police department through the city, to a hospital. And the hospital's like, geez, we'll need somebody to kind of run this. The police department person is staying. And there was an opportunity and I presented myself. I said, I think maybe I could help. And I was a new, fresh paramedic at that point. And I actually built a binder, literally this thick. I know this will be shocking to you, John, but I built a binder and said, hey, if we were to go to ALS, here's all the things we would do. And I researched what they would cost in the Boundary catalog. And here's how the system would work. And here's how it could be staffed. And of course, I know this will be shocking. Each page had a little tab with it and indexed and a bibliography and all of that. That's my J just coming out in my ENTJ. And the leader of the hospital, the director of emergency services, said, interesting. I'll give this guy a chance. And as you mentioned, there were some parts of the path that didn't work so well. So when I came to a fork in the road, I didn't always pick the right fork. And the next thing I know, I found myself selling software and went, what am I doing? I'm a sales rep? What part about me says I'm a sales rep? Oh, backtrack, get back on path. And stumbles and earboxing and kind truth and failures and restarts. And the buzzwords today is like, redesigning myself or reimagining myself, all kinds of things along the way. But I'm curious, as I was listening to your story, and maybe there were some similarities with mine, but some words stood out. You said things like influence. I heard you talking about stumbles, which makes me think of practicing something, right? When I played something on my cello, that wasn't, no, not that key, this one over here. And so I heard you talking about things like practicing and I mentioned influence already and choices that you made. And I wonder, John, we often say there are 4 or 5 things that we believe to be truths about leadership. So I want to test you for a moment.
Okay.
As you reflected on this journey of yours, my guess is when you began the journey, that this was a little darker and this was a little darker than it is today. I certainly didn't have all of this white that I have today. But here we said there's 4 or 5 truths. Do you believe this today based on reflecting on your life story? So we say, first and foremost, leadership is a choice. Second, we say it requires a practice. It requires practice. Third, we often use the word, it requires a sacrifice. And I might suggest in our context today that maybe the word also is investment. I might make a sacrifice when I invest the way you've done with your Amazon account. I'm sure Bezos is quite thankful of the Becknell and Reinert Amazon accounts, because mine certainly looks like that. And it rejects victimhood. And maybe a way of saying that differently is it accepts mistakes. And then lastly, I might put some words in this, but I'll suggest this, is that it recognizes there is a difference between position and title and influence. They may go together, they may not. But if that's true, is this thing that John and Aaron says true? Or is it just a bunch of hooey? As you think about your life's journey, does that connect or doesn't it? And if it does, how? Let me ask that first. And then I have another question, if I might. Do those 4 or 5 truths that we believe in leadership, do they hold water? When you think about your life's journey, did they fit?
So not only did they fit for my life, I wound up talking to a manager this week who said this. he said, I'm struggling so much with the new generation of EMTs and paramedics that are coming in. I'm wondering if I should quit.
Mm.
Because the old tactics and the old ways of influencing employees that he had developed through the years were not working now.
Mm.
And that he was and very courageous, was very courageous to say, my capacity to influence this new generation of workers, save simply going to them and saying, do this or else I'll fire you, was not working. And so back to your things, and my own journey is, yes indeed, and for this new manager, the question is it indeed is a choice, and a beneath that choice is we often say, what is calling to you in leadership right now? Because in order to be influential to people, you want to influence them towards something. So it's this question, this choice is always there, which is says, where am I going? Where are we going? What needs my leadership? So it definitely is that choice. And we often think vision too big.
Mm.
A night supervisor in an EMS organization can have a vision that every person who comes to work on his night shift has the best possible experience possible, or everyone that comes to his night shift is seen and heard and respected. That's a vision. That's a powerful vision in which you can influence people toward it. And that doesn't have to, the organization could be going somewhere totally different. But leadership always begins with this calling that then is the choice. And yes, it's a practice. This guy was telling me, the one who said, should I quit? He's saying, oh my God, there's a bunch of stuff now calling to me. Do I really want to practice this? Do I want to focus in on this new group of people, learn about them, all of those kinds of things? And in order for him to do that, he was going to have to make an investment, which was going to have to be a sacrifice of something. Maybe it was his own past of micromanagement, his own past of feeling very comfortable in just checking the boxes and doing it the way things are. It was there. And all of this, if he was going to stay in the job, and this is where our conversation led, was going to demand that he feel that there's something he can do, which is the rejection of victimhood. Mm-hmm. It feels like these workers today just won't do what I want them to do. They're just too selfish. They're just too focused on their cell phone. They're all of those things. And on my own journey, and this is what's happening to me right now, is I'm still having to reject victimhood. Because some days it just feels like it's too over my head. And then I have to say, wait a minute, what can I do? What action can I take in this larger thing? So yes, the answer is yes, all of them. And I have to tell you this, position and title wasn't the path forward, but I know you probably want to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, and if you wouldn't mind, I thought just picking each of them apart a little bit. That context you gave, I thought, was outstanding. But I wanted to also add another nuance to the choice, especially for those that might be listening that aren't maybe in a leadership position or are interested in the next position. If you're waiting for someone to invite you, to encourage you, to offer to you, I worry that that won't happen. Certainly, John, our work with organizations is to encourage them to get really clear about that, to announce, to share regularly and often, even at the point of hiring, to say, John, welcome to our organization as a brand new EMT, paramedic, dispatcher, biller, fleet, supply, the list goes on. We're going to talk about a number of different things, but I also wanted to talk about how in our organization you become a leader. But that doesn't always happen. And so my encouragement is to the folks that are listening that are either aspiring to a leadership position, are in one and are aspiring to the next one, is you need to make some choices. And the choice might be to take action. The choice might be to say, I'm interested in that. The choice might be to go to your boss and say, how do I become you? What skills, talents, actions, behaviors, degrees, investments, et cetera, I might need. You might have to take on a project that you don't necessarily get paid for. You might have to step out. And so this choice part, I think, is really important. And I wanted to also emphasize the point you mentioned for all of us that are in leadership positions. We make decisions every day, every hour, every minute of whether we choose to lead. That email comes in and you might look at it and go, yeah, no, I'm just going to leave it. That you see that person go past your office that you say, boy, I really should have that crucial conversation. Oh, not today. Too busy. Oh, look at the time. Every day we make decisions, we make choices about leadership. And hopefully, if we had that equation of the choices I make that are for leadership and the choices that I make that aren't, hopefully this would be the case where our balance is off. And the balance is the scales towards leading more than we don't. So I just think choice is such a profound first step, especially for those that are aspiring to a position. I wish even in myself that I did more of that. I wish more often I went to individuals and said, you're our next this. And what can I do to help you to get there? I don't do it often enough. I do it some, but I need to do it more myself. So your thoughts about choice, your advice, your counsel,
I just want to put a point on it.
please.
The point is this. So if you're watching this today, here's a question to ask yourself. What is going on in your organization today? What's going on in the thing where you're leading? What's being asked of you? What is the situation asking of you? And let me just put that in context. If you go on a multiple victim car accident and there's 3 or 4 people scattered around who need attention, that situation is asking for leadership of a particular kind. It's asking for you to choose to step in and do some leadership. The same thing in your organization today. What is the big challenge, and what is that challenge asking of you? Maybe it is, as a person I talked to earlier this week, maybe the challenge is really figuring out what the next generation of workers need to be totally engaged and motivated within our organizations. But that's where you get to the choice. If you just say, what is life and the work asking of me today? What is the real need? If I'm going to rise to that, what is that? And then that's where the choice is. Do I want to rise to this? And if you just, and you'll see this cascading as we go down the thing, but if you don't look at that, you'll wind up falling back into management mode, just putting out the fire, and you will miss out, and this is what I really want to emphasize, you'll miss out on the great leadership joy. The payoff for leadership is not in the bucks you earn. The payoff for leadership is the intrinsic reward of really saying, aha, this is what's being asked of me, and then making the choice to step into that leadership vacuum and start to be the one who influences.
Outstanding. Practice. I had an interesting recent experience. And so as a paramedic today, I just finished 60 hours of continuing education for my paramedic card. I was excited that I got it done. But after and just even earlier today, I hit submit on my application for National Registry. And shortly after pushing the button, I had this feeling, and the feeling was this: have I put 60 hours of practice into my leadership certification, shall I say. So what do we mean by practice? When I think of paramedic, I certainly can think of that. Am I better at ACLS? Did I learn a few new things about 12 lead EKG interpretation? Do I understand capnography and the role it can play beyond just cardiac arrest? I understand sharpening my saw in that practice, but what's a leadership practice?
Yeah, that's it. That's so. You and I have been preaching this for a while, ever since we started the academy, that leadership is indeed a practice, and it is both a practice in that we never arrive. So it's interesting you compared this to your National Registry card, because at least in some realms the National Registry card says that you are at least competent at doing something, right? So interestingly, there is no National Registry of EMS leaders. There is no card and no 72 hours or whatever the continuing education hours are. There is none of that, and yet there is this need in which this is something that we develop, but we never fully arrive there, or we never get to the point where we're kind of blessed, and from here on forth you're a leader. So it always takes this practice. It always takes this whole idea of both saying, what is my practice? Like a physician or attorney has a practice where they have people that they're influencing, because influence is always about influencing a group of people. So there is that practice, but then there's the thing of, how do I do that? And the how do I keep practicing? So for me, that practice is continuing to say, to ask this question of, am I being influential? And if not, what are the skills, talents, abilities, knowledge, input, advice, coaching, guidance that I need so that I am truly and indeed beginning to have an influence on the people that I need to influence?
Yeah, I think of it very similar. And an analogy I might share is, not so long ago, a good friend happened to give me the ability, the tool to weld aluminum. I've never done aluminum before, always wanted to. I love welding, something I learned in high school, and kind of enjoy all kinds of aspects from it, creating things to the technical. And here I had, it's a spool gun and it uses my machine and I hook it up. But I thought, oh my goodness, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. I've never done this before. What's going to happen? So for me, the first part of my practice is I just had to overcome the fear. I just had to do it. And you know what, John, how do you suppose that first aluminum weld went?
I don't know how you do that without melting all the aluminum. It probably didn't go that well.
It did not go well. The setting was too high. The gun speed was too slow. First one is I blew a big hole through it, and the next was a big chunk of the weld, and I put these. I just was doing what's called a T weld. You could think of it as a butt weld, and I did that and got done, and I had still two pieces that weren't attached to each other. So I just had to overcome the fear, and then you know what I had to do? I had to do a whole bunch of those welds. And
Hmm.
then early on, when it wasn't working really well, I had to swallow my pride. And as a good friend of ours and a consultant we're honored to work with, Ben Wasman often says, is swallowing one's pride is an acquired taste. The more you do it, the more you do it, or the better you like it. So a neighbor out at the lake, he's often called MacGyver, does all kinds of welding. I had to kind of go, hey, Wayne, would you come look at my welding and tell me what I'm doing wrong? So I went and found a mentor. I went and found somebody that I could go talk to help me fine tune my practice. And he told me some things. I wasn't cleaning the weld the way I should. There's a different wire brush you use for aluminum than you do for normal metal. So first, I just had to practice it a whole bunch. I then had to find somebody who could give me some kind truths. I had to overcome that fear. And I just had to do it a bunch. And the more I did it, the better I got at it, the better advice that he could give me, the less fear I had. So I think when it comes to our practice of leadership, my recommendation to folks is first, leadership is a stagecraft. A question I know I often get, and John, you might get as well, is the folks who say, boy, I've never presented before. How do I go in front of the group and present like I have some knowledge and expertise? You fake it. You go up there and you stand with confidence, even though you're shaking inside and your palms are sweaty and you're going to vomit a little bit. And then you go, wow, I got done and people are applauding and they thought it was great and they gave me fives on the eval. So it takes a little stagecraft. You got to overcome that fear. And you got to find some mentors. You've got to find somebody who will know when to give you the hug, but will also know when to put the foot halfway up your behind when you need it. The kind truths. Because if you find a mentor who always just goes, oh, you're so great, doesn't have the courage, doesn't have the confidence to tell you the things that you need to hear. So when my neighbor and friend came over and looked at my welds and said, boy, you really suck at that. yeah, I really do. And I didn't get mad. I didn't get upset. I didn't storm off because he didn't stroke my ego and say, oh, that's not so bad. He said, no, you clearly don't know what you're doing here. Let's start from scratch. Perfect. Let's start from scratch. So when I think of practice, it is indeed practice, but there's pieces and parts to it.
Yeah, I think a good way to think about this is that we hope that that first weld that you made, you probably took a fairly simple weld, right? And you didn't try to do a complex weld. So it is in our leadership. And those of you that have spent time with us know that we talk about really being a balanced leader, where you have a balance between transactional leadership, transformational leadership, and servant leadership. Those are fancy theoretical terms to talk about that early on. The simple weld, or the simple influencing that you are going to do, is often transactional. It's often about reward and punishment. And it's about being able to simply say to people, if we all move in this direction together, here's what we'll get. And if we don't move in this direction, here's what the consequences will be. That's really transactional leadership, and we need that. We need that at different times, but the transformational leadership is really this one where there's a combination of where we're going, the relationship that we have with people, all resting back on our own character and executive presence, that then people say, hey, you know what? I want to follow this Aaron guy. There's something about Aaron. I'm not even sure he said we should go over here to this hill, or we should go over here to this direction. And I'm not even sure all about that, but because of who he is and how he's taking us, I'm going that direction. So that transformational leadership takes practice. And then there is that servant leadership where we are indeed meeting the needs of the people that we are trying to influence, where we build on that. And none of those three kinds of leadership works by itself. But here's the deal. The deal is finding balance and how to use that's going to come by practicing. And here's the little sharp point on this one. The sharp point is go back and ask the people you're trying to influence how you're doing. It's that simple. If you're trying to influence a new generation of EMTs and paramedics to be engaged, to participate, to want to make the company successful, or to want to make your shift successful, or to do some very difficult things during these trying times, go back and ask them. What am I doing? What am I not doing? What's working? What's not working? And find the person who's willing to give you that candid feedback. And with that candid feedback in hand, come and talk to a mentor. Come and talk to us. Come and talk to somebody else. Find somebody who has a little bit further ahead of you on the road, and Get sharp about what you need to be working on. That's the practice. Because if you, here's the deal, our brains will say, I don't need to practice. Often we feel that we've arrived and we don't need to learn, or if I have to humble myself to say I need to learn more, I need to do more practicing. It's like going over there and asking Wayne, you know, you'd like to go over to Wayne and just show him this great weld you made. And instead, you got to go over to Wayne and say, hey, Wayne, I have no idea. I really messed this up. And that's got to be part of your leadership practice. And that's why we're encouraging people, get in a leadership group. Get in a group of people that want to grow as leaders. It may be in your company, it may be out of your company, but you will start to mimic the kind of people you're around. And if you're around growing people, you'll grow.
And I just want to emphasize the point of when you ask for the feedback, be ready for the feedback. I certainly know that this is a fault of mine. So you get the feedback and then you need the lengthy explanation. Well, you don't get it. Here's what I was really trying to do, and you didn't understand it. Listen with more than these, right? We talked about our 4 levels of listening. Listen not only with these things, but also listen down here. And so, yeah, they may not have all the pieces right. And yeah, they may have missed this, and the other thing, but listen, hear, and bear witness. If you just want to ask somebody to have them pat you on the back, then that's not the case. And I see you're probably looking at the question as well that may have come in.
Yeah, and I have a response to that. So the question is really about using the metaphor of paramedic continuing education, being in those different areas of respiratory, cardiac trauma, all of that kind of stuff. What are those areas that we need to work in? So that's a great question, and let's just mention a couple of those areas that are really important in when you're practicing, where you need to work at it. So one of the things is in this whole area of clarity about where we're headed. If I'm influencing people, am I really clear about where it is that we're going? Because that's really key to connecting to the new generation that wants to know the why. Another area is simply in methodology. Are you actually using conversation? That is, are you actually communicating with people on a regular enough basis for them to know the why, to understand where they're going, to get the feedback, to get to know you, to trust you in a more transformational way of influencing them? So what we see most often is that leaders are not listening near enough. They're not investing the time in those kind of connecting conversations where they're just finding out where the people that they want to influence are. And this happens both to subordinates and to superiors and to peers. If you're trying to influence a board above you, it's going to take really some focused attention on communicating there. And then really one other area I'm going to mention, Aaron, is really this area of storytelling. Do I have a compelling story to tell? Because people want to know how this connects to something bigger, larger than themselves. And it is in the story where we tap into their emotional being. You know, when people are intellectually committed, it's not always that sticky. But when they're emotionally committed, they are there 100%. And they don't become emotionally committed without you telling a powerful story. So those are several areas of really working in.
Yeah, and I would add in, and you've used the word, and I think these components all are part of it, but influence. Leaders have influence, and the ability to be influential with people you work for, people you work with, people that work for you. But at its core, leaders are influential, and they do that through unproductive time investments like connecting conversations and storytelling in a number of different ways. I would also add leaders have to figure out how to both manage and lead fear in themselves and in their organizations. John, you and I constantly talk about the leaders that we work with that come up with what we call CEO workarounds. So when there's a challenge in front of them that feels too big, too scary, too maybe political, they create a workaround. And then they need a workaround for the workaround and a workaround for the workaround for the workaround. And you know where I'm going with that. And then lastly, I might just suggest that leaders do their own work. So where are you learning and growing? That would be a question I ask. That's a question I asked myself after my paramedic certificate. So I spent 60 hours. Did I spend 60 hours on my own leadership practice? What book did I read? What course did I take? What webinar did I participate in? What YouTube, what TED Talk? What investment am I making? Or is my leadership practice stale? Or do I believe that there's nothing new or different for me to learn?
And when you talk about that, I love that you brought that up because whoever asked this question, it's a wonderful question. Thank you for it. You're if you said, well, pick one area to work on, it's the one Aaron just mentioned. It's to work on yourself. Because here's the deal, when you show up, especially to a new generation of workers, they're smart, they're savvy. They are interested in who you are authentically inside. And there's a kind of a combination going on here. We've been through, the last year has been difficult for all of us as leaders. And here's the thing, difficulties reveal who we are inside. And if your own character, who you are authentically inside, is not what you want, your people are going to figure that out. If you like yourself and have a good relationship with yourself and your inner character, you're engaged in the game of working on you becoming a better human being. That is powerful for influencing people, especially in a transformational way. If you're authentic, so that when you say, wow, this is great, people believe it, or when you say this is bad, people believe it because they believe you. And remember, if people are going to follow you, trust is going to be the element that attracts them most, and that will come from you working on yourself.
I think the question that just came in really matches what you were just saying. So the question is, so what advice might we give a leader in this particular case in a larger organization? But I think it matches in any size organization that might be struggling with connecting more deeply with their personnel. And so I might suggest two parts. The first is asking myself why. Why is it that I'm having that struggle? Do I feel that they don't have anything really meaningful to offer? They're just bitching, moaning, whining, complaining? Do I feel like I'm above that? That my position, my title? Do I feel fearful that I'll get backed into a corner and I won't be able to explain why we use system status management in a system that maybe doesn't need it, or decisions that I've made I don't have a good answer for? What is it about me that holds me back? The other part that I was going to say is, and I just had this conversation with a candidate that I'm talking to about joining our organization in the senior leadership level, is I hope that this person has tons of unproductive time. And those that know us know I like to use that word. And I don't mean it's unproductive, but I mean in our EMS paradigm, we take that time as being very unproductive, and we shouldn't. It's probably the most productive. So is your schedule so jam-packed with so much what and how that you don't have the time to just clear the plate when the door comes and the crew wants to come in, or you just grab your credit card that day and go buy a bunch of pizzas and head all to the bases or catch the crews at the hospital? But if your day is so jam-packed that you don't, if your first answer is no, I want to hang out with the crews, I think they have something meaningful and important to share. And I don't feel like they'd ask me questions that would back me into a corner, but it's my time, it's my schedule. then I would have to ask myself, am I not delegating? Do people have responsibility without the empowerment? Do I have the right people in the right places? What about my schedule is keeping me from going out and doing it? Because, or do I need to influence somebody above me that says, hey, boss, you filled my plate so full, and you tell me that employee engagement is really important, or workforce. I don't have a mismatch. I just need your help. I have so many plates spinning. Help me go through them and put that together. So that would be my thoughts on that question.
Yeah, and a very simple addition to that is get curious. If you're struggling in connecting to the people, it's likely because you're not curious about knowing them. Whenever, even in a personal relationship, a love or a romantic relationship, or a parent-child relationship, or a friend-to-friend relationship, or a worker to co-worker, or boss to subordinate, the key element there is curiosity about the other. Because if you're not curious, your questions are going to fall flat, your conversation is going to go flat. So here's one of the things is that everybody keeps thinking that they know and understand the people they're trying to influence. That's a killer of an assumption. It will kill the relationship. But instead saying, wow, I want to know this person deeper, I want to know them more. So just simply going out and listening to people with the kind of ears that says, what are they really struggling with? What am I missing? What do I need to know about them? Why do they enjoy this attention with social media? Why is this pulling them? Why is this topic there? Why do they not want to pick up extra shifts the way I did early in my career? That kind of curiosity will make a connection.
And I think both of these questions really match this next part of the 4 or 5 truths about leadership that we've been talking about, which is investment. So the question about if I'm, in the EMS paradigm of education and clinical practice, what are the leadership equivalents? But at its core, in both of these questions has been investment. Am I making investment in myself? And I'll be so bold as to say we need degrees. And I would share with you humbly that when I had a great boss who pulled me aside and said, get your degree or I'm going to fire you. You need your degree to have the position that you are in. I'll work with you on it. I'll give you some time to get it done. But I needed a kick in the butt. And of course, I convinced myself, I don't really need a degree. I know those things. It's just a piece of paper for the wall that will prove that I know the things I already know. And sure, there were some of that. I had been a leader in EMS for probably 15 plus years at that point. But I learned so much more from the interaction with the other students that were leaders to the chance to read what was new and emerging. Get a degree. Make it part of your investment. Be a regular, make regular investments in yourself. I was going to say books, so I was quickly trying to come up with the equivalents because not everybody's a reader, and not all the generations would gather the information that way. So whether it's a book, webinars, YouTubes, podcasts, leadership circles, inside and outside of our industry, conferences, the list goes on. But that's my self-reflection is, did I put 60 hours into did I invest 60 hours into my practice the same way I invested 60 hours into my paramedic practice? And what do you imagine, John, these last 2 years, my recertification cycle, 60 hours into paramedic or leadership? Which one do you suppose I've used more of? How many ambulance shifts did I take in these last 2 years?
Yeah, it's what's so interesting about that is that if we got serious about continuing education for leaders and we're willing to make the sacrifice as an organization, and that's where I want to go with this, is that we keep seeing organizations that will invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into clinical gadgets, clinical stuff, and not invest in leadership development. And then they wonder why they struggle with things like culture and recruitment and retention and things like that. The sacrifice is both at an organizational level, it's at an individual leader's level. And I think this, I love that you use this word, both investment and sacrifice, but I think the sacrifice also, and I'm going to point this out, is I think the sacrifice is also a little bit of sacrificing ego. Because one of the biggest problems I see from senior leaders in the EMS industry across the United States is that they are afraid to say, I need to learn more. They'll certainly go to various conferences and they'll stand in the back or sit down in certain sessions. But to really pursue and say, here's what I'm actively working on, is a sacrifice of ego. And it's a sacrifice of saying, and you know, for me, this last year has kicked my butt. It's been one of the most challenging years in terms of having to give up my old ways. March of last year, I would have told you we can never teach leadership like we're doing it at this very moment. And that was a sacrifice. It was a sacrifice to give up old, strongly held, cherished beliefs. And that's what I think often is the sacrifice that we have to give up to be influential.
Yeah, and I just think we can't emphasize the investment.
Right.
And I think that really connects into the position and title piece. Is we know lots of leaders, and our listeners probably know lots of leaders that have the right color helmet or the right thing on the collar brass that says they have position, they have title, they have authority, but they're not influential. They're not leaders. And we likely know lots of individuals who don't have the right color helmet and don't have the right color brass, but that are extraordinarily influential. I heard recently a little kind of quote that said, you know, if a leader doesn't have anyone following them, they're just going out for a long walk. And so just this thought that says, how are we learning and growing? Leading today, and many of the people listening to us today have been leaders in organizations for a long time. We all acknowledge it's vastly different. It's vastly more complex. The workers are different. The technology is different. I hate to date myself, but I had the bag phone, the 3-watt Motorola bag phone that, you know, was 5 pounds and a little, and now look what I can do with this thing. And yet we have workers now that know nothing but this and can easily fact check us. They can check Google on anything we say. They can watch a YouTube that says, no, that's not how it goes. You should do it this, and the other way. So what's those investments that we make? What are we doing to build and grow ourselves? If we're not, I just to wrap up real quickly, one of the proudest moments I had in a leadership academy, there were 2 of them, when the CEO of the organization sat next to his or her employees that were coming to the leadership academy. And so the CEO, there were 2 different times that I can think of at this moment. And so when it came around, because others were saying, how come my CEO is not here? How come my chief's not here? How come my, whatever the title would be? And these 2 individuals said, I have as much to learn as all of these subordinates that are here. And what a powerful message that sent to those individuals. And they proudly told that story over and over again in other classes that they participated in.
So we are quickly running out of time, and we didn't get a chance to talk about one of our favorite topics, which is not being a victim and rejecting victimhood. But we'll save that. But I just wanted to offer something and see what you thought about it in closing. That likely, I want to suggest that likely one of the most important things that our organizations can do is get clear about leadership development within their organization. How are you now developing leaders? And if you're not a top leader in the organization, ask yourself, in what way might I begin to lead leadership development from the middle? We often quote that wonderful John Maxwell thing that says 99% of leadership comes from the middle. But what we would suggest is that any 21, 22-year-old that comes to your company and says, gosh, kind of interested in leadership, how do I develop and grow and become a leader within this organization? If you can't give them a clear and structured answer to that question, you don't have it figured out, and you don't have leadership wired into your organization. And so our encouragement is to begin to make leadership development and the leadership path part of what you're doing in your organization. And then lastly, just make sure that you are on the path. That you're on the path. I just wanted to say, Aaron, one of the most difficult leadership things that I often have is influencing you. Mm. And yet often we try to influence each other all the time. And one of the things is that when I'm trying to influence you, I learn a lot about influence. Because I have to, because you're not easy. Mm. And it's one of those things where we're simply reaching out and beginning to evaluate our own capacity to influence, even if it's peer to peer, is a wonderful way to be on the path.
Yeah. And in closing, I might also, for those that are saying, well, where do I begin? I might encourage, similarly, if somebody was in a class about literature and they might say, where do I begin? The instructor, the professor would probably say the classics. And so that would be my encouragement as well, is the leadership classics. If you haven't, and all of these are now available in all of the mediums. So if you haven't read, listened to, watched the 7 Habits, that's where you should start. Dr. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. It's in all of the mediums. There's YouTubes and things with Dr. Covey. Exactly. I proudly now have, thanks to a good friend and mentor, a signed copy from Dr. Covey on the 7 Habits. But then Maxwell's books, The Good to Great and Great by Choice, Margaret Wheatley, Patrick Lencioni, all of those kinds of classics. The other thing I might encourage is if you have those and have referenced them, is just begin, as John said, be curious. Just go to Amazon and type leadership. When we can go to the bookstore, go to the bookstore. And when I travel, often the thing I do is I walk past the little store that sells everything and I look what books are there. And I see something, I see a title that catches my interest. And then I go open it up and read a little bit about it. Be curious and grab the books, the topics, the things that catch your interest. And also be open to grabbing the books and things where you say, I don't like that. I don't agree with that. Then read some more about it.
Young people really like Tim Ferriss's stuff. And he has this wonderful big fat book. You don't need the book. You can listen to his podcast, but Tribe of Mentors is really, it's hundreds of people's advice for life and for leading. And so there's just many, many resources out there.
Yeah. Well, John, thank you. Thanks for your excitement and enthusiastic participation on this subject and sharing that journey. And thanks for everyone who jumped on to listen to this today and to be part of our conversation. As you can see how excited we are to talk about it, and love to be able to share it not only with you, John, but all of the folks listening in with us today.
Thanks much. Bye, everybody.